The battlefield was silent. For years, the war between the Xilari Dominion and the Zarkan Empire had raged across the galaxy, leaving nothing but ruins in its wake. The latest battle had ended only days ago, but space was still littered with the wreckage of shattered warships and drifting bodies. Fires flickered in the void, the remains of another meaningless conflict. A lone Imperial patrol cruiser drifted through the aftermath. Captain Varric watched from the command deck, his mandibles clicking in frustration. There was nothing left worth salvaging, just dead ships, dead soldiers, and the cold vacuum of space. He sighed and turned away, until a piercing alarm blared through the ship. "Commander," a voice crackled over the comms, "we're picking up a signal." Varric turned sharply. "What kind of signal?" The officer hesitated. "It's old, very old." A shiver ran through Varric's spine. There were no old signals in this war zone. Everything here was recent, destroyed only days ago. His claws tapped against the control panel as he brought up the data. The signal pulsed in a repeating pattern, a distress call, but not from any known Imperial or auxiliary frequency. The language was ancient, the encryption primitive yet unmistakable. It was human. Varric froze. Humans were a myth. The Empire's archives spoke of them in hushed whispers, violent, cunning, and dangerous. But they were extinct, wiped from history long ago. "Locate the source," he ordered, his voice quieter than usual. The scanners directed them toward a derelict warship floating near the wreckage of a Xilari dreadnought. Its hull was covered in battle scars, but it was intact. The ship's design was unlike anything in the Empire's records. Bulky, angular, built for war, not elegance. "Prepare a boarding team," Varric commanded. Minutes later, a team of Imperial soldiers entered the mysterious vessel. The interior was dark, cold, and eerily silent. The walls were lined with faded banners, symbols no one recognized. Strange weapons lay abandoned in storage racks, their designs brutal and efficient. The air smelled of rust and decay. Then they found the pods. Rows of massive metal containers lined the ship's lower deck. They were covered in ice, their control panels flickering weakly. Varric stepped forward, brushing a clawed hand against the surface of one pod. Through the frost-covered glass, he saw a figure inside, a body perfectly preserved. A human. His blood ran cold. This was impossible. The Empire had wiped them out. There were no survivors, and yet here they were, frozen, waiting. A low hum filled the room. The pods began to glow. The ice cracked. Varric took a step back as the ship's ancient systems roared to life. Red emergency lights flickered, alarms blaring in warning. The frozen figures inside the pods twitched, their bodies awakening from a deep, unnatural sleep. The first pod released a burst of steam as it unlocked. The door hissed open. A man stumbled out, his breath heavy, his muscles tense. His uniform was old, his face lined with scars. His eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned the room in an instant. More pods opened. One by one, the lost warriors of humanity stepped forward, their bodies stiff but their expressions hard as stone. The first man's gaze locked onto Varric. His voice was hoarse but firm. "Who the hell are you?" Varric couldn't move, couldn't speak. The humans weren't dead. They were here, and they were waking up. The air inside the ship was thick, stale, and heavy with the weight of time. Steam still curled from the cryopods, the ancient mechanisms hissing as they released their long-forgotten occupants. The humans stood there, eyes adjusting to the dim, red emergency lights, muscles stiff from centuries of sleep. Captain Darius Kane rolled his shoulders, testing his limbs. His breath was slow, controlled, but his mind raced. Something was wrong. This wasn't the ship they had launched from. The uniforms, the weapons, the creatures standing before him, tall, armored, and alien. His instincts took over. Assess, identify, secure. His sharp gaze locked onto the figure closest to him, a towering alien with a deep blue exoskeleton and slit pupil eyes. Kane's fingers twitched toward his sidearm, but his holster was empty. Stripped, his pulse quickened, but his face remained unreadable. "Who the hell are you?" Kane demanded. The alien hesitated, its mandibles clicking. It had weapons, but it didn't raise them. That was a mistake. Kane moved, fast. Before the alien could react, he surged forward, slamming a fist into its chest. It stumbled back, more out of shock than pain, and the other humans followed his lead. They weren't just waking up, they were waking up ready for war. A soldier to Kane's right grabbed an Imperial officer and twisted its arm behind its back. Another tackled a guard, wrestling for control or weapon. The aliens shouted, confusion spreading through their ranks. Varric, the Imperial commander, took a step back, his mind reeling. This wasn't how prisoners behaved. These were lost wanderers in need of rescue. These were soldiers, hardened, disciplined, and deadly. Stand down. Varric barked, raising a hand. We are not your enemies. The humans froze, but only for a second. Kane didn't loosen his grip on the alien's shoulder. His voice was steady, cold. Then, why the hell are you armed? A tense silence filled the room. Kane could hear the faint hum of ship systems struggling to maintain power. He could feel the weight of his men's stares, waiting for his next move. Varric exhaled slowly. We detected your signal. We thought the ship was abandoned. You should not be here. Kane studied him. The words weren't a lie, but there was something else. Fear, not just of them, but of what they represented. How long? Kane asked. Varric tilted his head. How long what? Kane's fingers clenched. How long have we been in those pods? The Imperial commander hesitated. That alone sent a cold weight settling in Kane's gut. Finally, Varric answered. Over 300 years. The room went still. Kane felt the breath leave his lungs. 3 centuries. His team had gone into cryosleep expecting to wake up in a few months. A year at most. Not this. One of his soldiers, Lieutenant Pierce, exhaled sharply. That's impossible. Varric's eyes darkened. No, what's impossible is that you're alive. Your species. He stopped himself. Your will was lost long ago. Kane's blood turned to ice. No, he muttered. It wasn't true. It couldn't be true. Earth was strong. Humanity was strong. There was no way they had just disappeared. Varric looked at him carefully. And you. Kane's breathing was steady, but his fists were tight. Know what? The alien's mandibles twitched. And then he said the words that changed everything. Humanity is gone. Kane's jaw tightened. He didn't move. Didn't blink. He just stared. Gone. The word echoed in his head. It didn't make sense. It wasn't possible. And yet, deep inside, something told him that Varric wasn't lying. For the first time since waking up, Kane felt something colder than fear. Rage. He turned to his soldiers. Their expressions were just like his. Disbelief, confusion, anger simmering beneath the surface. Earth was gone. Their mission was over. But their war was just beginning. Kane stood in silence. His breathing was steady, but his hands had curled into fists. Around him, his soldiers were frozen, their minds trying to process what they had just heard. Humanity, gone? Lieutenant Pierce took a step forward, shaking his head. That's not possible. His voice was rough, disbelief laced in every word. Earth was strong. The colonies, millions of us, spread across the stars. We wouldn't just disappear. Varric watched them carefully. The humans were unpredictable, dangerous. Even without weapons, they moved like warriors, calculating, ready to strike at the first sign of weakness. He knew what they were thinking. This can't be real. But it was. The Empire doesn't lie, Varric said. Your kind vanished centuries ago. The records say your worlds fell silent. No distress calls, no survivors. Just silence? Kane turned his head slightly, his sharp eyes studying Varric. Silence? That wasn't how humanity worked. If they had been attacked, they would have fought back. If they were losing, they would have sent warnings, scattered survivors, resistance cells, something. Who did this? Kane's voice was low, controlled. Varric hesitated. We can't know. The answer wasn't good enough. Kane stepped closer. You expect me to believe that? That an entire species vanished, and no one knows why? Varric felt his throat tighten. The human's presence was suffocating. The air between them charged with something ancient, something dangerous. The Empire assumed you destroyed yourselves, Varric said finally. That was the official story. Kane scoffed. Convenient. Varric's mandibles clicked in irritation. Believe what you want, but that's what's in the records. After a few decades, your worlds were declared dead zones. No one goes near them anymore. Kane exchanged glances with his soldiers. A heavy silence hung between them. Dead zones. The words twisted in his gut. That meant there was something there. Something the Empire didn't want people seeing. His instincts screamed at him. This isn't over. But right now, they had a bigger problem. Kane turned to his soldiers. We're leaving. Varric's eyes widened. That would be unwise. Kane ignored him. He moved with purpose, checking the room for weapons. His soldiers did the same, scanning the Imperial forces for anything they could use. The Imperials tensed. You're prisoners, one of the soldiers growled, raising his rifle. You're not coming anywhere. Kane sighed. Didn't say we were asking. Then he moved. In a flash, Kane lunged, grabbing the nearest Imperial by the arm and twisting hard. The alien's weapon clattered to the floor. Kane caught it mid-drop and turned it on the rest of them. His team followed suit, moving like a well-oiled machine. Pierce drove his elbow into a soldier's gut, ripping a pistol from its holster. Another human slammed a guard against the wall, knocking him unconscious in one brutal strike. Within seconds, the rune flipped. The Imperials, who had walked in thinking they were in control, were now at the mercy of a handful of humans. Varric didn't move. He had suspected this would happen, and yet seeing it unfold was something else entirely. These weren't ordinary soldiers. There was something far, far worse. Kane kept his stolen rifle steady, eyes locked on Varric. "Where's the nearest escape ship?" Varric exhaled. If he lied, they'd know. If he stalled, they'd take what they wanted anyway. Finally, he pointed. "Docking bay. Down the main corridor, left at the intersection." Kane nodded. "Appreciated." Without another word, the humans moved as one, slipping out the door. Their steps were silent, their stolen weapons firm in their hands. Varric stood there, staring at the empty space they left behind. His soldiers groaned, recovering from the brutal efficiency of the human assault. The Empire had always assumed humanity was dead. But if these soldiers were alive, if more were out there, then the Empire had just made a fatal mistake. They had awakened the ghosts of a forgotten war, and ghosts always came back for vengeance. The corridor was dimly lit, lined with flickering emergency lights. The faint hum of Imperial machinery echoed through the walls. Kane led the way, his stolen rifle held steady, his senses razor-sharp. His soldiers moved like shadows behind him, their movements precise, controlled. Even after 3 centuries of cryosleep, they were warriors first. No alarms had been triggered yet. That meant the Imperials were still in shock. Good, it wouldn't last. "Docking bays ahead," Lieutenant Pierce muttered, glancing at the map on a stolen wrist pad. Kane nodded, but that didn't slow down. He wasn't foolish enough to think this would be easy. The Imperials would react soon. The real fight hadn't even started. As if on cue, a metallic voice echoed through the ship's speakers. "Alert! Intruders detected near the docking bay. All security forces, intercept immediately." Kane sighed. There it is. A door slid open at the far end of the corridor, and Imperial soldiers poured in, rifles raised, armor gleaming under the dim lights. The lead officer stepped forward, mandibles twitching. "Stand down," he barked. "You are outnumbered and outgunned." Kane tilted his head. "You sure about that?" The officer hesitated just for a second. Then Kane fired. The first shot took the alien in the shoulder, sending him crashing back. The hallway exploded into chaos. Kane's soldiers moved instantly. Dive, cover, return fire. The Imperials had numbers, but the humans had experience. Pierce dropped low, squeezing off 3 quick shots. 2 soldiers fell, their bodies crumpling. Another human, Corporal Haynes, charged forward, flipping a crate for cover before laying down suppressive fire. Kane didn't stop moving. He advanced through the gunfire, dodging, weaving, his stolen rifle kicking against his shoulder with every precise shot. He was faster than them, smarter, more ruthless. An Imperial lunged at him, blade flashing. Kane sidestepped smoothly, grabbing the alien's wrist and twisting. A sickening crack followed. The Imperial howled in pain before Kane drove his elbow into its skull, knocking it unconscious. More soldiers flooded in. Too many. "We're pinned," Pierce called out, ducking behind a metal barrier. Kane's mind raced. They couldn't hold this position forever. They needed to move. Then, out of the chaos, a voice crackled through the ship's intercom. "Ceasefire." The Imperials hesitated. The gunfire slowed. Kane's finger hovered over the trigger, but he didn't fire. He recognized the voice. Varric. A few seconds later, the doors on the other side of the corridor slid open. Varric stepped through, his expression unreadable. "Enough," he said. Kane didn't lower his weapon. "You got a death wish, Commander." Varric shook his head. "No, I have a deal." Pierce frowned. "A deal?" Varric took a slow step forward. "You want to escape. I want answers." His gaze locked onto Kane. The Empire buried the past. They told us humanity was gone. But if you survived, his voice darkened. Then someone lied. Kane studied him. He didn't trust the alien, not for a second. But something about the way Varric spoke, there was something there. A crack in the Imperial's certainty. "And?" Kane said cautiously. Varric exhaled. "Help me find the truth." Silence. Pierce looked at Kane. They could still fight, still take their chances. But Kane wasn't just thinking about escape anymore. The Empire had buried something, and Kane needed to know why. He lowered his rifle slightly. "Talk fast, Commander." Varric's mandibles twitched. The ghosts of humanity's past had returned. And now, they were about to uncover the lie that erased them. Kane's grip on the rifle didn't loosen, but his mind was already working through the possibilities. Varric had power here. Authority. If he was willing to break ranks, then something had shaken him. Pierce was the first to voice what Kane was thinking. "You really expect us to believe the Empire kept secrets from its own commanders?" Varric's mandibles clicked in irritation. "I know what I was taught. What every Imperial officer was taught. That humanity destroyed itself. That your people vanished, leaving only dead planets behind." He exhaled slowly. "But if that were true, then you wouldn't be standing here." Kane remained silent. "He's right. We shouldn't exist." Varric took a step closer. "If you help me, I can get you off this ship. No more firefights. No more running. You want answers? So do I." The silence stretched. Kane could feel the weight of his soldiers' stares. Trusting an Imperial was a risk. A big one. But the alternative? Running, hiding, scraping by while the truth remained buried. That wasn't an option. Kane lowered his rifle, just slightly. "Then start talking." Varric nodded. He motioned for them to follow and led them through a side corridor, away from the docking bay. The human soldiers exchanged worried glances but moved in formation, weapons still ready. The ship's hallways were eerily quiet now, save for the distant hum of power conduits. Every so often, an Imperial crew member would spot them, freeze, then quickly disappear down another passage. Kane smirked. "Good, let them be afraid." Finally, Varric stopped before a sealed door. He placed his hand on a scanner, and the locks disengaged with a heavy hiss. The door slid open, revealing a dimly lit chamber filled with holographic archives. Pierce let out a low whistle. "That's a lot of classified files." Varric stepped inside. "Most of these records are restricted, even from high-ranking officers. But I've seen glimpses, fragments of information that never made sense." He gestured toward a central console. "If the Empire hid the truth, this is where we'll find it." Kane eyed him. "And why exactly are you betraying your own people?" Varric hesitated. His mandibles twitched, his gaze unreadable. "Because I was raised to believe in order, in truth." His voice hardened. "And I refused to follow a lie. That, at least, Kane could respect." Varric moved to the console, tapping in his command codes. The screen flickered, then displayed a single phrase. "Project Oblivion, restricted ACS." Kane's stomach tightened. Oblivion. The word alone sent a chill through him. Varric entered a bypass code. The console hesitated then. Slowly, the screen filled with data. The first image appeared. It was grainy, distorted by age, but the moment Kane saw it, he felt the air leave his lungs. A human city, or what was left of it. The structures were crumbling, overgrown with alien vegetation. But the worst part wasn't the decay. It was the emptiness. No bodies, no signs of battle, just absence, as if the entire population had simply vanished. A second image. Another city, then another, colony after colony, all abandoned, all silent. This, Pierce's voice was barely above a whisper. This wasn't war. Varric's expression was grim. No, it wasn't. Kane clenched his jaw. His mind raced through the possibilities. Humanity had enemies, plenty of them. But this wasn't the work of an invading army. There was no destruction, no bodies left behind. This was something else. Then the final file appeared. A transmission. Varric hesitated, then played it. Static. Then a voice, distorted, panicked. "They're not what we thought. Not an invasion. Something worse. If anyone hears this, don't." The message cut off. The file ended. Silence. Kane exhaled slowly. He could feel it now, deep in his gut. The truth wasn't just buried, it was erased. Varric turned to him. "Whatever happened to your people, the Empire didn't just cover it up. They're afraid of it." Kane met his gaze, his expression hard. "Then it's time we found out why." Kane stared at the flickering screen, the weight of the revelation settling deep in his gut. The room was silence, save for the faint hum of the ship's systems. This wasn't just an erased history, it was something far worse. Pierce exhaled sharply. That transmission, whoever sent it, they weren't talking about an enemy. His voice was tight. They were scared of something else. Kane nodded slowly. Not an invasion. Something worse. Varric's mandibles twitched as he brought up more files, but the data was fragmented, corrupted, or deliberately deleted. "Most of the records stop here," he admitted. "Whatever happened next, it's gone." Kane's eyes narrowed. "No, Someone made sure it was gone. Haynes, one of the youngest soldiers, shifted uncomfortably. What if this isn't just about a cover-up? What if this is still happening? The question hung in the air. Kane turned back to the last image, the empty cities, the silent streets. This wasn't the result of a war. There were no bodies, no destruction, just absence. Something took them. Or worse, something made them disappear. Varric straightened. I know where we can get more answers. Kane arched a brow. And where's that? Varric hesitated for only a moment. One of the dead zones. The words sent a chill through the room. Pierce frowned. You're talking about restricted space. Exactly. Varric turned to face them fully. The Empire forbids any travel to former human worlds. No ships are allowed near them. His mandibles twitched. But I know of a station that monitors them. If anything has changed, their databanks will have recorded it. Kane exchanged a glance with his soldiers. A restricted Imperial station. A risk, but they had already crossed that line the moment they woke up in this strange future. Kane turned back to Varric. How do we get there? Varric exhaled. The station is deep within Imperial space. A military installation. Pierce shook his head. So we'd be flying straight into the lion's den. Kane considered their options. They had no allies, no resources. Just a stolen rifle and a former Imperial officer willing to betray his own empire. But they had something else. A mission. A reason to keep fighting. Kane's voice was steady when he finally spoke. Then we'd better move fast. Varric hesitated. You're sure about this? Kane's expression hardened. He had spent his whole life as a soldier, as a warrior, and now for the first time he was fighting for something even bigger than survival. I'm sure, he said. Varric gave a slow nod. Then he turned back to the console, typing in a new set of commands. A new set of coordinates appeared on the screen. The station, the truth, and the nightmare that had wiped out humanity. Whatever was waiting for them, they were going to face it. The stolen Imperial transport slipped through the vast emptiness of space, its engines humming softly. Kane stood near the viewport, staring out at the swirling nebula in the distance. The station was close now, just a few more minutes. Pierce checked his weapon, his jaw tight. Feels like a trap. Haynes let out a dry chuckle. That's because it probably is. Kane remained silent. He had the same feeling. The Empire had spent centuries burying the truth, erasing humanity from history, and now they were about to tear that secret open. Varric, seated at the controls, kept his eyes on the console. The station scanners haven't detected us yet, he muttered, but once we dock, we'll have limited time before they realize we don't belong. Kane turned from the viewport. Then we get in, pull the data, and get out. Varric didn't respond immediately. His mandibles twitched before he finally said, There's something you need to understand. Kane frowned. What? Varric hesitated, then exhaled. This station doesn't just monitor human worlds, it studies them. The dead zones, the missing colonies, everything. He looked up, his dark eyes unreadable. The Empire isn't just afraid of what happened, they're watching for it to happen again. The words sent a chill through the room. Haynes' fingers tightened on his rifle. Again? Before Varric could answer, the ship's alarm beeped softly. They had arrived. The Imperial station loomed ahead, a massive circular structure floating in the void. Dark, silent, watching. Kane pushed down the unease curling in his gut. Dock us. Varric's hands moved across the controls. The ship slid into the docking bay, locking into place with a quiet hiss. No alarms, no security rushing in. Too quiet. Kane led the way, his soldiers following in formation. The docking bay was dimly lit, abandoned except for the occasional maintenance drone. The air smelled stale. Something wasn't right. Varric pulled up his scanner. No life signs, but the station's power is still active. Pierce grunted. So where the hell is everyone? Kane didn't answer. He motioned forward and they moved deeper inside. The corridors were empty. No crew, no guards, just the faint hum of machinery. Then they found the first body, a human. Pierce cursed under his breath. The body was slumped against a console, a look of horror frozen on its face. No wounds, no blood, just lifeless. Haynes checked the vitals, but he already knew. Dead. No sign of struggle. Varric swallowed hard. This shouldn't be possible. Kane turned to him. Explain. Varric hesitated, then brought up the station's records on a nearby console. The screen flickered. Data scrolled past. Then, a message appeared. Warning. Containment breach. Kane's stomach tightened. Containment? Varric's hands moved quickly across the keys. This station wasn't just monitoring, it was holding something. The file opened, a single video feed. The screen flickered, showing security footage from the station's lower levels, a containment chamber, bright white lights, a figure inside, a human. Kane felt his breath catch. The figure was standing in the center of the room, perfectly still, eyes closed. Then, the lights flickered, and the figure moved. Not walked, not ran, just shifted. One moment standing, the next inches from the camera, its eyes opened. Black. Endless. Wrong. Then the feed cut to static. The silence in the room was suffocating. Pierce swallowed. What the hell was that? Varick's voice was tight. That was a survivor. Kane's pulse pounded. The missing colonies, the empty cities, the Empire's fear. It wasn't war. It wasn't destruction. It was something else. And now it was loose. Kane clenched his jaw. They came here for the truth. Now they had to survive it.